Hi, Tom.
How are you today?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
Very good.
Great. I'm so glad that you could participate. Thank you for doing that.
You bet.
Yeah. So, how are you managing with everything that's happening?
It's been crazy busy, so been good.
So, I'm going to go ahead and start today's show. Welcome to God and Matter. I'm Arlene J.M. Grant, your host, and today's guest is Tom Ziglar. Tom, tell us, who are you?
Well, let's see. Author, speaker, dad. That's probably number one, dad.
That's awesome.
My daughter's 25, been married 32 years. We have a grand puppy. The grand puppy's visiting us right now. Zig Ziglar was my father, and you'll never meet a more blessed human being in the world than me.
I love your dad through the legacy that's left, and I love how you continue it. So, thank you. So, in the midst of being, can you tell people about what Zig Ziglar did? Because some people do not know. We see a lot of quotes, but I don't know that people really fully appreciate the magnitude of who your dad is and was to many.
You bet. So, Dad was an author and a speaker, primarily, probably known for his motivational speeches on personal development and success. He wrote 45 books. One of the neat things about legacy is 9 of those books have come out since he passed away, um, transcribing his works and things like that. We estimate that he impacted about 250 million people in his life. He might be the most quoted speaker out there. When you look to today's kind of leaders, thought leaders, experts in the personal development, success, motivation area, a big percentage of them will say they got their start listening to Zig Ziglar. Maybe knew him personally, inspired by him.
That's awesome. So, how is it that you are shaping that legacy? I mean, he left quite a bit of prolific inspiration. How are you shaping it and bringing it forward into 2020 and beyond?
Yeah, so that's a great question for anyone. We all. I have a statement. I say, well, we're all going to leave a legacy. The different, the question is, will it be by design or by chance? Because what we do every day that builds a legacy. And so I've really tried to be intentional. I've studied legacy for the last 10 years. Been very intentional about it. My personal mission is very simple. It's to create the atmosphere that allows you to become the person God created you to become. So when dad, in life, dad told me, and he told my sisters the same thing. He said, you'll never understand true freedom until I'm gone. And we really didn't know what that meant. That was something that we didn't understand when he told us. And then after he passed away, started realizing, wait a second, for me personally, I started working in the company over 30 years ago. And so my role was to create the stage, the platform, the machine that would allow dad to go out and do what he did. And so when he passed away, you have to take an inventory and say, wait a second, the thing that built the company to where it is, its personality, the material that dad had, his speaking, those gifts and talents are with him. And so you really can't, people used to come to dad all the time and say, hey, I'm going to be the next Zig Ziglar, meaning they wanted to speak like him. And he would look at him and he'd say, oh, that's a horrible mistake. There's
True.
right. There's only one Zig Ziglar, but you can be the best you in the world. So do that. And so I started to realize that it wasn't my responsibility to copy everything that dad did. I realized that people hoped and wanted me to live by the same principles and values, but to utilize my own unique gifts, talents, and strengths, which are different than his. And so that's how we do it. It's there's a good word called curating. So you take all this material and you curate it to make it relevant in 2020 and based on the gifts and talents of the people on your team, which is different. and it's always changing. And that's really, with the situation we're in right now with the virus and everything, change is happening so fast. I mean, there are companies who are resisting doing online training, and now they don't have an option, and they're learning, wait a second, we can learn maybe uh, better than before. It's not the same, it's different. And so different doesn't mean better or worse, different means different. But there's a lot of things that we can learn from it. And so as we progress the company, the core, the principles, the values, the beliefs that we hold true stay the same. How we communicate it, how we get it out, the people who take it, they're all different. And so you got to tailor it to that individual.
That's amazing, and that's so true. Question, because you said so much and it was so rich. First, with legacy, how are you defining legacy? Because a lot of people don't understand what legacy truly means.
Yeah, so I have a couple of definitions of legacy. My favorite one is, excuse me, my favorite definition of legacy is intentionally preparing those you love to grow through life's most difficult challenges.
That's beautiful.
So the reality is we've got people we love. It could be our kids, it could be our family. For me, legacy, we adopt everybody. So as soon as we get to know you, you're adopted. So your family. So if I can intentionally prepare you, right, to grow, and so that's a mindset. It's not I have to go through this. It's I get to grow through this. Life's most difficult challenges. Well, we're in a huge challenge right now. I mean, the world is, like in generations, we haven't felt this, this kind of overwhelming thing that nobody knows when it's going to end or how big it's going to get or what's going to be different. So we can't prevent challenges from people. It's impossible. So what do we have to do? We have to set the example, be the example, have the influence so that people grow through it. One of the examples that I use in that is Tom Brokaw said that the greatest generation the United States ever had was the generation of men and women who went and fought World War II. I mean, think about it. The war started, we were unprepared, we didn't have the resources, we went off to battle, we were fighting a superior army with a lot more experience, and it took several years, but we won the war. And then those men and women came home, and the greatest economic boom in the history of the world happened. So of course they're the greatest generation. And then one of my friends, Andy Andrews, said, Tom, they weren't the greatest generation, it was their parents. Their parents raised the men and women who fought World War II during the Great Depression. They woke up every morning at sunlight and went to bed at sundown and worked the whole time because they had nothing. All they had was principles, values, and each other. And so I think right now what we could be seeing is the formation of the greatest generation that it's ever lived on the planet. And it depends on how we approach it and our belief in that.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. And so I would ask you, what ways do you think people should be inspiring and rearing their children in this era? I think people need compassion, empathy, because we've had that lacking in this current generation. But what kinds of tools do you think parents can instill in their children? And for those who are young adults or teens who might be hearing what you have to say, what would you say? What are the values? What do people need to work on in this time period?
Well, the core values, obviously, love, integrity, kindness, compassion, generosity, loyalty, faithfulness, discipline, hard work. But I also think that there needs to be a sense of ownership, a sense of if it's to be, it's up to me. I'm a big believer that we have responsibilities, not rights. And there's a difference there. And one of the things that I've studied is Jewish tradition. And so one of the things in Hebrew, there's really not a word for rights. Okay. You don't have a right. You don't have a right to anything really, but you have a responsibility. And so what that means is that if somebody who has less than you has need, you have a responsibility to take care of them, right? You have a responsibility. It's not their right to ask for it or get it. It's your responsibility to help them. And that's a pretty big deal, because everybody on the planet, we can find someone else who has less than we in some area. So that puts us all in this together. We all have a responsibility to help those around us. The difference is that if I have a responsibility to help someone, and then I do that, and then they don't use wisely what I've given, then I don't have a moral obligation to keep giving. So it's kind of like, I'll just use a family example. Your brother or sister comes to you and they say, "Hey, I can't make the rent. Can you help me out?" So you give them, "Sure, I got it. Here's $500. Then the next month they come back and they say, "I can't make the rent." Well, meantime, they spent $2,000 on TVs and things like that. You don't have a moral responsibility or obligation to help them anymore, right? When the need is real, you have a responsibility. So I think there's a lot of that. And the idea of the stronger mindset or the anti-fragile mindset, it's a belief that the trials that we come against, the things that are tough, the things that I call it, we're in the furnace right now, and we're being, the things that don't matter are being burned away. It's like an onion. Our culture has stuffitis. It's all about the stuff. And then every day,
This is so true. This is so true.
It's like every day the onion gets peeled back another layer, and the stuff doesn't matter. And it's getting down to, man, who do we love? And golly, I just want to talk to them. And then of course there's toilet paper. That's not stuff. That's a critical thing.
Right? It's funny. I do think a lot of this boils down to love. And I think that's how we get through this, as our best weapon, our love for self, our love for our belief system. Like for me, it's God, and our love for others. I think that's it, and how we get through this. But I think it's
Absolutely.
how we get through life in general. And my hope is that this experience, once we get past it, is not forgotten, so that people remember that there's a better way of living. And I think people are going to find that through this.
Yeah, one of the people that I follow and admire, her name is Dr. Carolyn Leaf. And I don't know if she said it or she was quoting someone, but she said that the number one cause of death in the United States is loneliness.
Yes.
Okay, so what do you mean loneliness? Well, when you look at all of the things that somebody does to compensate loneliness, then it makes sense, right? You've got all the, so many people eat too much or eat the wrong things, or they get addicted, or they get depressed, or they have other psychological and emotional challenges that have all of their spin-off side effects. And you add it all up, and that kills more people than cancer or heart disease, which, by the way, both of those are the root cause could be loneliness.
That's
So
true.
what is loneliness? It's the absence of love. If we feel 100% loved, then we're not lonely, even if we're alone. See the difference there? And then, of course, I love what the scripture says. God is love.
Yes. Sorry. That's my thing. One of my mantras is God is love, I am love, to internalize that within me, because that oneness that we have with God, like in the wheels of Ezekiel, when they moved in unison with God, right? So
Right.
I believe that it's our responsibility to get to that heightened level. So oftentimes I ask God to raise my love vibration, that I have more of a oneness with God. That there is that timing that is so perfect. And you're right, I agree with you that being alone is not being lonely. And so a lot of people need to discover that love in order, when they're in this isolation period, to figure out that they need to be more comfortable within themselves. So saying the different three prongs of love that need to be exercised and mirrored. So Sorry, I jumped in excitement when
Yeah.
you said God is love, because I believe that with my entire being. So my entire being agreed with you.
Awesome. Yeah. To me, it's not that complicated. We try to make it complicated, and most people get into trouble trying to fill the void with something else other than God. I mean, we're searching for love. God is love. And so we've got this void. And so we go about our life filling it with stuff, filling it with accomplishment, filling it with, substitutes, whether it's drugs or adrenaline or whatever it is that we go after. And we always end up short. Uh, One of my mentors is Rabbi Daniel Lapin, and he said this last week. He said the opposite of depression is not happiness. The opposite of depression is purpose.
Ooh, say that again. That is so
Yeah.
deep.
Yeah, the opposite of happiness or depression is not happiness, right? So we have this wrong belief that, we should be happy, right? We should it's all about whatever makes you happy. That's what the culture says, whatever makes you happy. Well, then we get depressed. And so we think that the search for happiness is going to pull us out of the depression. It's not. The opposite of depression isn't happiness. The opposite of depression is purpose. So when the founding fathers started the country and they wrote the Constitution, one of the original versions said life, liberty, and the pursuit of virtue. Now that's interesting because virtue, it didn't make it. They replaced virtue with happiness. But you see, the founding fathers in that generation, what they knew is that if you pursued virtue, you would, the result, the fruit of pursuing virtue is happiness.
Yes.
Okay. And so they looked at those as exactly the same. But today that's not the way we look at it. We look at it as, well, as long as I'm happy, life is good. And so then you get a win-lose game, because I can certainly do things that make me happy at your expense.
Mm-hmm. True. True.
Right? So there's something bigger than happiness. That's love. That's purpose.
That's the absolute truth. I think that this moment has a lot of opportunity for people to be still. You know, it says, be still and know that I'm God. Like to
Right.
have that moment of stillness that people can connect with their purpose, connect with God, connect with their purpose. Would you have suggestions or ideas for people in terms of how they could connect and find their purpose? Because many people say, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things there. First off, I look at it of course, we're believers in Christ. Personally, I like the term Christ follower
Mhm.
better than Christian.
Yeah, I don't like the word Christian. It was pejorative. I mean, it was created as an insult, but yeah. Mhm.
Um, and so what is a Christ follower? So you just look it up. Whatever Christ said, you follow it. If 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 you call yourself a Christian and you don't follow what Christ said, you're not a Christ follower. So use another term. So that's kind of where I am. So as a Christ follower, I look at several verses. I look at Romans 8:28. All things work together for good to
Really.
those who love God, called according to His purpose. So what does that give me? That gives me unbelievable hope in a time such as this. Right? As difficult, as hard, as tough, as much as I wish it wasn't happening, and believe me, if I could wave the wand and present the cure and everybody go back to normal, I would do it, right? I would do that. But at the same time, even in the midst of all this, I've got this hope it's going to work together for my good. That was my dad's life verse. That was his verse. When I was 12, I picked mine, and my verse is James 1, 2, and 3, which is considered all joy, my brethren, when I encounter various trials, knowing the testing of my faith produces endurance. So in other words, I should get happy, joyous, excited when a trial comes because it's preparing me for something.
The
And
next
so,
step.
right. And so here's the thing. What's God preparing us for? I think it's our purpose.
I think so too. You know, I don't want to sound too preachy, but I feel like as a society, when you talked about the things, the stuffitis that people had, I think we kind of lost our purpose as a society in understanding our relationship to God and others, and also to ourselves. And I feel like this is a reset button and an opportunity. So the magic wand, if we went back to like Chronicles, it says, if my people who are called by my name will
Yes.
humble themselves and pray. I think that this is we've been humbled because maybe we didn't humble ourselves. And then also that resolution, that solution is to turn to God, to turn to love, to become love, to have that vibration that heals us and the earth.
Yep, absolutely. I agree. We have turned away from that. As a believer, as a Christ follower, my mission is, my spiritual mission is two things: to have a vibrant relationship with God and to speak his truth in love. That's really it. And I have this picture, and I'm probably not the one who originally painted this mental picture, but here it is. When my daughter was 5 years old, sometimes she would come in my lap, and after about a minute of sitting there, she would ask me for something, some candy, a toy, right? So I knew immediately I was being played. And then sometimes she would come and sit in my lap, and after 3 or 4 minutes, I'd be like, "Baby, why are you sitting in my lap?" And she would say, "Oh, I just want to be close to you."
Aw.
And so immediately, if she'd asked for it, I'd buy the whole candy store for her.
Aw.
And I think that really is a simple explanation of our relationship with God. For most people right now, we draw close to God when we want stuff or we want the pain to go away. When what we should be doing is saying, God, I just want to be close to you because you're my father.
That
Right?
I agree with you. That is my approach. I actually spend a lot of time like meditating on the word and reading the word. So I feel like I crawl up into God's lap and get that comfort. It says in Psalm 91 that God shelters you under his wing and to hide you in the secret place. So I often ask God to hide me in the secret place and just cuddle up with God, to just be clear, to be revived, to have that balance and that oneness. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. So you asked earlier, so how do we create that, or how do we discover our purpose? How do we find that? And I'll tell everybody what I believe, and this is kind of awesome. And it doesn't matter where you are on your spiritual walk. And it's called Two Chairs. I learned this from my really good friend Bob Bodine. And basically, every morning you take 5 minutes out. I know 5 minutes is a lot, but we all have an extra 5 minutes now.
or
Today,
50. Yeah.
yeah, today my commute time to work was 11 seconds. Okay, and I got coffee on the way in. Right, we've all got extra time right now.
Mhm.
So Two Chairs is real simple. And it doesn't matter where you are on your faith walk, or even if you're unsure. You get two chairs, one for you and one for God. And you sit there and you ask God three questions. God, do you know what's going on? Well, of course he does. He's God. Number two, God, are you big enough to handle this? Well, yeah, it's God. Number three, what's the plan? and then you just listen. And you said earlier, it's a time to be still. And I think that's the big question right now. So would the creator of the universe, if there was a 1 in 100 chance that he would show up, would you do that? Well, I've got a guarantee he will show up. But we don't do it. So that's the challenge. So wherever you are, if you're a believer and you want to go stronger and deeper, do it. If you're searching and you're even doubting, is there a God? Just ask him to show up. See what happens.
Yeah, it's interesting you say if you don't believe in God, you're not really sure, to ask God to show up, and God will show up. So my question is, what if the person says, how do I even ask a God to show up that I don't believe in? What would you say?
Just exactly what you just said. God, I'm not even sure if I should ask you because I don't even know if you exist. I'm listening. So if God is love, right, and we're sincere, what's going to happen? It's unbelievable.
Very true. One of the things that I've been telling people, because there have been people that I've been trying to help who've had issues to come up, and I spent a lot of my career doing conflict resolution. I actually went to seminary for a little while and things of that nature. But I've said, people say, I don't believe in God. And I don't push people to make them believe in God. I usually tell them, try to focus on something you love. Think about it, maybe it's the tree, maybe it's your cat. That connection with love will take you to a different place, something simple. And I think that people going to the core, to the basics, I think is where their transformation can come into being.
Yep, I agree. I was either cursed or blessed with a nerdy need to know the why behind everything. And it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition when you say, okay, I need to know why and I got to have faith, right? And somebody would ask me, they'd say, they'll say things like, well, how can you believe in God? I just don't have that much faith. And I'll say, well, what do you believe in? And they might say something like, oh, well, I don't know, but and so I'll say, well, how did the world come about? And they'll tell me the Big Bang, right? Which isn't even the right question, because there's an origin question older than the Big Bang. Because God, theoretically, if God decided to create the world through the Big Bang, he could have done that too, right?
Exactly.
So I say, well, I don't have enough faith to believe in the Big Bang. And they say, what do you mean? And I say, well, let's just look at it from math and physics. The Big Bang is basically matter and antimatter at some point in the distant past, billions of years ago, collapsed in and then exploded into an explosion that created the universe as we know it. Now, mathematically, there's an infinite number of possibilities in the size of that explosion, right? Between no explosion to infinity large. Okay. But there's only one level of explosion that could create the universe as we know it. Just one. Out of an infinite number of possibilities, there's only one. And so what you're telling me is you believe in one number in infinity is the reason for our existence. I don't have that much faith. Because statistically, for me to say an intelligent designer and a creator put this in motion, actually, there's a greater level of probability for that. So what we're talking about is we've got faith in either one. Now, my greatest testimony is the miracles I've seen personally, the experiences I've had in my own life, which is me, right? And you're probably the same way. And so when I always, whatever belief somebody has, I'm always very positive with that, because my goal is not to convince you that you're wrong. My goal is to live in such a way that you want some of what I got. Right? And that's a love approach.
That is love. That is probably the highest form of love. So let me ask you about this. My dad, unfortunately, he passed away 2.5 years ago. And one of the things, my dad was a mechanical engineer, and he told me scientifically he did not believe that the Big Bang was possible due to the speed of light, as people have explained it. He doesn't believe it's scientifically possible.
Yeah. Now, when I studied there was a book I read called The God Hypothesis, and it was basically a bunch of, scientific physics, speed of light type of arguments about whether the world was intelligent design or not. So I don't know anything specific on that, but there are too many. There's another example of, when Carl Sagan came out with the Cosmos in that great show, which was awesome. At that time, they said that, there's trillions of stars, trillions of planets, or billions and billions, I think is what he said. And so there's got to be other Earths just like this one that statistically have all the things. Well, there was like 13 requirements at that point for a planet to hold life. The right matter, the right distance from the sun, all these things. Well, since that time, that number has grown. There's over 512 requirements. And it gets bigger every time. And so it's one and then a number that has 100 zeros after it is the probability of there being another Earth just like ours. So the statistics on it, the more we learn, the more it takes faith to believe that.
I agree with you. I don't think that this is all that there is, and it might be a little arrogant to assume that we would just be it. That this Earth, this planet Earth, is the only thing that exists. I do think that there is more life out there that exists, and I do believe that God is energy. For me, I'm biologically Jewish, but I believe in Christ and the Christ consciousness and the message and the love of Christ. And I could never deny Christ. And I feel that it's important for that same idea of Christ to be mirrored in our society, whether you believe in it or not. And I think that ties into the whole idea of creation and the idea that we can connect with this energy force. I don't know if you've ever been around someone and you feel like this warmth from the person. You don't touch them, but there's this energy that's just, you feel good when you're around them. Have you ever had that experience?
Oh yeah, a number of people. I'm friends with Nick Vujicic. I don't know if you know Nick. He's the speaker. He's got no arms and no legs. Just an amazing guy. When he rolls into the room because he's on a chair, the room changes. The atmosphere changes. It's unbelievable. He's the most fearless human being I know, and yet he's totally vulnerable. He can't run and he can't protect himself. So how is that? Well, he's filled with God's presence, right? I mean, that's what's going on. And so, yeah, I mean, all the time you meet people like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think meeting those people is good, but also working on being those people is good. And I think that can be a takeaway from this experience. So if someone was looking to you now beyond their spiritual work, what else would you suggest to them that they can do beyond following Ziglar and Zig Ziglar and what you do? And can you tell people how to find you as well? Because not everyone knows.
Yeah. So the easiest place to find us is at Ziglar.com, which is ziglar.com. That's our website. That's where we do. Now, most of our work, and this is kind of cool, most of our work is in business and small and large individuals. We have certified trainers that we work with who we certify to teach our materials. We have coaches that we certified who follow our coaching. And everything that we do is presented in such a way that a Fortune 500 company or a government can have us come in. It doesn't, it's based on biblical truth, but it doesn't have Bible verses in it. What we've discovered is no matter where we go in the world, when somebody says, there seems to be like a faith behind this, can you tell us more about it? It's much easier to share it from that perspective in our ministry and what we do, which is the marketplace, than it is to put things in there that would definitely say, hey, wait a second, we're a government. We can't have you come in here. It's funny. I'll just tell this quick story. We would do a lot of training with the Fortune 500, and we were doing a presentation for a large company, very politically correct, very just, not going to have any religion or anything mentioned that could ever offend anybody. And they asked a question. They said, well, how can we let you in? After all, Zig Ziglar was a Southern Baptist preacher. Well, he wasn't. Never went to seminary, was never a preacher. He did teach Sunday school, but he wasn't a preacher. And they said, so how can we let that in? So we explained that. And then we said, but we will tell you the truth. We built these programs based on biblical principles. And we've got about 35 character qualities that we pulled right out of the scripture that are embedded in our program. We don't use any Bible verses or anything, but here's what we'll do for you. We'll take out any of these qualities that you think you don't want us to teach. And so they leaned forward and they said, okay, that sounds fair. And so this is what we did. Okay. Love, kindness, respect, generosity, hard work, discipline. See where I'm going?
Yes.
Well, we want all those. Well, of course you do. It's the way we were created to want this. And every single human being has all of those qualities inside of them. You just got to recognize them, claim them, develop them, and use them. And that's what we teach. And so we help people grow from the inside out, which is you got to work on your personal self first. And then 7 areas of life: the mental, the spiritual, the physical, the family, the financial, the personal, and the career. So when we work with business owners, we're like, you're always going to have trouble running a business if you're not right, because the owner gives the direction. And if the owner's messed up, the business is going to be messed up. So, right, we work on the owner, and then we help the owner develop systems for their business. And when you get those two things right, then you can go out and change the world. And that's really kind of our approach. It's not send your money off to some superpower and then they fix the United Nations then fixes the countries, and the countries fix the states, and the states fix the communities, and the communities fix the neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods fix the houses, and the houses fix the people who live there. No, that's not the way it works. The way it works is you fix yourself, right? And then you work on your family, and then you work on your neighborhood, and then you work on your community, then you work on your state, then you work on your country, and then you work on the world. And it's an inside out approach. And that's how we approach things.
And that's a healthy approach. It's interesting. It makes, when you talk about working on yourself first, for people who don't necessarily understand that, think about when you take a plane and they give you that course before the flight takes off. They say give yourself oxygen first. And so in order to breathe and to help others breathe and breathe life into business, you need to be breathing properly.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we've talked about a lot of good stuff, and there's so much more that we could talk about. You're amazing. And I'm so thankful that you came on today. My question is there anything I haven't asked you that you think people need to hear, or that Spirit tells you that needs to be said?
Yeah, let me just share a quote that I think is for such a time as this, in this COVID-19 situation that we're going through. I was thinking of all the things, the mindsets that we could have, the beliefs that we could have. And I looked through Dad's quotes. So the Zig Ziglar quote that fits this time the best, I think, is this one: expect the best, prepare for the worst, and maximize what comes. So what does that mean? Well, expect the best. I'm going to go out with an attitude of gratitude, hope, and encouragement and love. Whoever I talk to, I'm expecting the best of them and for them. I'm going to have a smile. Even no matter how tough my situation is, I know that things are going to work out together for my good. And the reason that's so important is when I lift my own spirit, my immune system gets a boost, right? And when I lift your spirit, your immune system gets a boost. So there is no downside to this approach, okay? So expect the best. So what does prepare for the worst mean? Oh man, it means that we wash our hands 20 seconds, 20 times a day. We make sure we've got, our supplies in the kitchen so that we can, shelter in place or do whatever we have to do. It also means that this thing might last longer than we hope. So you know what? Based on that, I better get in good physical shape. I better eat right. I got to get enough sleep. I got to get the right nutrition. I got to feed my mind the right stuff. I need to think into the future on my business. And what's going to happen? What's the worst thing that can happen? How do I plan for that? How do I prepare for that? Why am I doing that? Because I need margin. You see, if I'm in great physical shape and I've planned for the long term, there's going to be somebody I love who's going to come to me and they're going to be hurting. And I've got to be there to help them, right? That's the bottom line. So the last piece of that is maximize what comes. So when someone comes to you personally for help, you listen to them 100%. You let them talk, and then you give them encouragement. You give them hope. And if they need a meal, you give them a meal. Whatever it takes, you're there. If somebody comes through you from a business perspective and they say, hey, I've got a lot of problems I need help with, how do you maximize that? You help them solve the problems. You dig in. You help them solve it. And then you give them a little bit extra. You give them the hope, the encouragement along the way. So on the surface, it seems like expect the best, prepare for the worst, or opposites. No, what they allow you to do is maximize what comes, which means that, and this is the ultimate thing, okay? So Rabbi Lapin said this: when we solve a problem, we're often rewarded with certificates of appreciation. We call that money, okay? But whether we get money or not, this is what Rabbi said: God is never happier with his children than when they're solving the problems of his other children. Now that's big, okay? So think of it this way. We are being put through a trial, not of our own doing, to prepare us for our purpose, to perfect in us what God created us and called us to do. And is there any greater calling than helping one of his other children in trouble? I don't think so. And so that's the mindset: expect the best, prepare for the worst, maximize what comes.
That is incredibly powerful and incredibly beautiful. You have a beautiful soul, Tom Ziglar, and your
Thank
dad's
you.
legacy is a blessing. I actually feel like I'm going to cry. I'm so moved by what you said, but thank you so very much. I wish you and your family many, many years of amazing legacy and blessings, and I hope that people will come to Ziglar, Ziglar.com, to get some of that great inspiration. You also have some free materials that you provide to people as well, as your paid training that people can avail themselves of. But thank you for being light.
Thank you so much. There is one thing that we do have that's free that I wrote just for a time as this, and you can get it at Ziglar.com/stronger. And it's a guidebook on how to handle this tough time.
Okay, Ziglar.com/stronger.
That's it.
Okay. Tom Ziglar, thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you. Be blessed.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I love that episode. Tom Ziglar, whose favorite role as dad, is one of my favorites. This interview probably made him a favorite of yours. His father, Zig Ziglar, is well written with approximately 45 books and has reached more than 250 million lives. The legacy of Zig Ziglar is very much alive in Tom. He offered so much insight and inspiration, the most important of which was to love self, God, and others. I agree. Tom's work at Ziglar.com, Ziglar, is for companies and individuals. As he shared, there are many resources available, some of which are free. Please check out the resources available at Ziglar.com. It will bless your life. Thank you for tuning in to episode 103, Legacy and Beyond. Our next episode, 104, features Rosalind Gaines, a prolific playwright. And if you haven't already, check out episode 101, Your Voice, and episode 102, Brand Strategy. God and Matter, a new podcast, which is actually commercial free, is produced by Arlene Speaks Media, LLC. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, visit our website, godandmatter.com. Again, thank you so much for listening, and be well.